Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you today. I actually don't really know anything about corporate innovation, which we just heard so much about. So I'm going to talk about green innovation from a very different perspective, from the consumer side, which is what we focus on at Frog. But I hope I can share with you some insights and some learnings that really make us think about what it really means to innovate in this space, what it means to bring an innovation to market that is actually successful, that will make a difference in people's lives. And it's quite tough. It's really a challenge for us. We've had a number of successes and failures with clients over the years. And so I'm going to share some of those learnings with you, and hopefully you'll find this useful and insightful. For those of you who don't know us, so Frog, we're a global innovation firm. We've been around for about 40 years and change. Headquarters in the US, but located around the world. I'm from our Shanghai office, where I've been for the last 5 years, previously from New York, in our New York office. And we're an innovation firm, so what that means is companies typically come to us because they want ideas that are very different, that are uncommon, that are different from what they've come up with, and they want us to turn those into beautiful products. They can be physical products, they can be services, they can be digital experiences, they can be environments. And then make them real. And our motto is actually love what you make, and this is actually really kind of gets at the core of what we do. The sexy part of our work is coming up with the ideas, and a lot of clients like the fact that we use all types of research techniques and ideation techniques and bring designers together with technologists and come up with crazy things. But in the end, if we can't actually bring it to life and make it real, and making it real is quite tough nowadays in the world of complex systems and networked architectures and more than just creating a simple product. But if we can't make it real, it's just a portfolio piece, which is nice to show off. But in the end, we haven't really made a difference for our clients. It's interesting because I feel a little bit guilty as Frog even coming to speak about this topic to you all. I mean, if you ever wanted us to do work for you, we would show you, we'd pretty much show you a pitch that looks like this. We'll show you all this cool work we've done for companies like Apple and Disney and GE and big brands around the world, all types of products that we've made for them. And you'd probably be pretty impressed by it. But when you think about it, none of this is really green innovation. And in fact, if anything, this is proliferating consumerism at its finest. Right? We're trying to get you to buy more stuff that is contributing to, contributing to the environmental problem. I've just been traveling around Africa for the last couple months. Here I was in Nigeria with my colleague Jeremy, blending in, doing some immersive research, which I'll share a little bit more with you about later. I think I'm doing a better job than Jeremy is in Ibadan. But one of the things that's abundantly clear here is that everybody is very content with their Nokia phone. And this is something I see in China all the time. I see in Southeast Asia all the time. Do you really need to buy the new tablet, the new touchscreen device that people like us at Frog are creating for our clients and making you think that you need a new one every 6 months? It's a very different, it's a very different perspective when you travel into parts of the world where people don't have the luxury to purchase the amount of consumables that we try to convince them to purchase. There's a great quote by Victor Papanek. There are professions more harmful than industrial design, but only a few of them. Now, Victor actually is known as one of the fathers of sustainable design, and it's I think we often forget we often forget to really keep this in mind as we think about innovation. It's interesting when we think about where innovation starts. I hope with this introduction I've just given you, even though I'm claiming that we may not be the best at it at Frog, we actually do have a point of view in thinking about the problems of innovation that I think are very relevant to the green space. Where it starts for us is really with inspiration. That's often the first step. What will inspire an idea? And back in our earliest days, our founder, Hartmut Esslinger, did a lot of work for companies like Apple, and would say that the ideas would come to him in the shower. This was a different era for us at Frog, where we had these superstar industrial designers who were just in and of themselves, they were brilliant, brilliantly creative people and would come up with ideas whenever they came up with them. Now, that's not really a way to scale a business. You can scale a design studio that way, but it's hard to be a real consulting firm in that way. And so thinking about a process for inspiring has been something we've devoted a lot of our lives to over the last decade or so. So, where does inspiration then actually come from? What's interesting is if you look really far back, inspiration actually did used to be green. Go all the way back 500 plus years ago to, Leonardo da Vinci, those who are inspired by a model other than nature, a mistress above all masters, are laboring in vain. And you could argue that someone like him who would look to nature, would look to birds as a way to invent flying machines, which makes a lot of sense in those days because you don't have any technology like that, and birds seem to be doing a pretty good job. And so, this in some ways you could view as the founding of the biomimicry movement, which of course in more recent years has become quite large. We see examples like Qualcomm in 2007 that used inspiration from a butterfly to create an entirely new type of LED light. Interferometric modulation. I'm not going to pretend I know how that works, but they did. It's a a well-known story of how they looked at how these butterflies actually capture light and reflect it as a way to improve their LED technology. Nowadays, it seems increasingly hard to find examples of where green is actually truly inspiring us. So what's actually happened here? I don't know for sure. I'm not going to claim to give you all of the answers, but I do want to share with you what I think are some interesting insights that we find provocative and at least take us down the path of inspiration. Inspiration fundamentally for us means starting with the right question. And I think this is something that has changed a lot in our business recently. It used to be clients come to us with a very defined problem. We want to innovate in mobile money. We want to innovate in healthcare. We want to innovate in aviation, whatever it may be. And increasingly nowadays, the question is, we think we want to innovate in a certain space, but we don't really know what the parameters of it are. We don't really know how to begin. And so let's work with you for a while. It could be months, in some cases it's years, just to find out what are the right questions to ask ourselves that will serve as those provocative stepping stones that will allow us to look at an idea differently, and that hopefully will then spark that creative trigger in someone in the shower to come up with a brilliant idea. So, and my proposition to you is that we've actually, in the green innovation space, have been asking a lot of the wrong questions. Well, actually, we may be asking some of the right questions, but not all of them. Most of the questions that we ask are about use. What are the features of a product, of a service, of a system that are going to get us to use them? This, in the end, is the fundamental characteristics that define a product do relate to use. So it makes sense that we would start here. Much of the product development process, much of the processes that we use in terms of understanding consumers, running surveys, running focus groups, talking to the end user, all of those things are about understanding how people use a product and give us ideas for features that will make it more usable. One of the things that we've learned from our research process, we have a process we call Frog Immersive that is really about not asking people questions, but going into their lives, ideally by surprise and invading their lives. What this does is it allows us to see how people live in an untouched form, and this actually gives us some deeper insights into how people use or how people think about use. This is actually my favorite part of my job. I got to do this in Nigeria for a while. But we don't stay in hotels. We get to go on the road and we live in people's homes and we turn the home into a workspace. And we basically every moment of the day, from when you wake up to when you go to sleep, is spent talking to people, living locally, traveling locally. And the real goal of something like this is to get in a situation like this. This is my colleague Ihan from Shanghai. We were doing a program where we're looking at innovation in home organization, right? And this is where it's a real tough thing to study because there's a fundamental research bias. If you ask someone how do they organize their things, how do they clean their home, most people are going to lie because you want to come off a little bit cleaner and more organized than you say. And if you actually do some research that is more qualitative, where you get to visit them in their homes, most people are going to clean up their homes first, even if you tell them not to. That's just a natural reaction of how people, what people will naturally do when a guest comes in. So we have to sneak into people's homes, right? So here my colleague Ihan has gone to approach a few, this is in Taiwan, has gone to approach a few guys sitting at a cafe. Most guys are not going to refuse a girl who sits at the same table with them at a cafe, and she starts talking them up, finds out one of them has a girlfriend who lives nearby, and got herself invited into her apartment, and we go there, and now we see what it actually looks like. Now this is fascinating for us because it tells us many things about how someone organizes. There's actually, it looks messy, but there is a lot of organization in there. Some things are organized, some things are not, and that's really what we want to understand. What this research is really about is more than understanding how people use a product. It's about understanding what they aspire to, what motivates them, and what is going to drive adoption. And that, in the end, is one of the fundamental questions that in innovation we find ourselves spending more and more time trying to understand. Not usage, but what leads to usage. So specifically, before usage, what is the action that is going to trigger adoption? What is the exposure that is going to trigger awareness? And even before that, what is the fundamental trigger that will motivate you to even become aware? Now, at Frog, we geek out about this stuff, and there's a lot of this is inspired by the cognitive science world. There's someone we really like named B.J. Fogg, who's a cognitive scientist at Stanford, and he has a great theory about motivation and ability and how that triggers a behavior, basically claiming that your motivation has to be at a certain level, it has to rise, and your ability has to rise, and all of that needs to happen in parallel for you to actually decide to act. Motivations can be things like sensations. They can be pleasure and pain. They could be anticipations, your hopes, your fears, your dreams. And they could also be social pressure, right? Peer pressure, fear of rejection, or desire for acceptance. And similarly, ability may be things like, it's essentially a function of not just your capability, but also a function of your most limited resource, your scarcest resource. It could be time, it could be money, it could be physical effort, it could be brain cycles. But you need to kind of move up on both of those dimensions, and eventually you pass a threshold which will trigger a certain behavior. And one of the things that this theory really claims is that there are many examples of ideas that seek to motivate people who have high motivation and low ability, or high ability and low motivation. But what's hardest is what he calls signals, that which what is needed to trigger people with high motivation and high ability. You often find that something like green behaviors are something where this is most relevant. Most people many people who are knowledgeable about being responsible are quite intelligent and have a lot of motivation to do so. They also have the ability to do so, but they don't. For some reason, there's not that trigger that's able to push you past that threshold. So what is this? How does this teach us about green innovation? I want to talk about 3 stories about some of the work that we've done at Frog, all of which we're not claiming are the solutions to a particular green innovation problem, but made us think about innovation in a different way and help us think about, essentially serve as a platform or to provoke new types of ideas. So the first is around the future of driving. So this is I think it should be a pretty basic example just to illustrate the importance of motivation, the framework that I just showed you. Electric vehicles, of course, we all know are really hot. They're getting hotter and hotter. This is a new Citroën Servolt electric sports coupe, right? It's no longer the ugly-looking cars that you're used to seeing, but there's a whole world of sports electric vehicles that are trying to compete with the most luxury brands that you see out there. They don't necessarily have to be this color, but you get a sense of it. The problem, it looks pretty cool, right? But the problem is, you see a situation like this, right? It's self-explanatory. Like, what's wrong with this picture? You've got this $100,000 sexy car and all these like dirty cables around it. And unlike pumping gas, charging your electric vehicle takes time. So you're parking it there, with cables left around it while you're going to while you're out at a restaurant or wherever you may be. Now the gas station world isn't exactly known for creating a beautiful experience. But what's interesting about electric vehicles is they are newer. They need to charge for a while, and there's a perception that they should be doing something better. Now, when one of our clients, Ecotality, they came to us and they have a device that looks like this. It actually works, but it doesn't really look like anything special, right? It's a box with a cord that allows you to plug in your car. It does what it's supposed to do. Its design purely follows its function. Went through a whole design process. In the end, we've created something that looks like this. Right? It's a new product line called Blink, a very modern, clean design. No exposed parts, no visible fasteners, volcano shape to essentially ensure that there's no places for rain or snow to pool. We were really inspired by the kind of the binary nature of electric charging in general, to use kind of a black and white, on and off, visual language that we bring into the UI and into the product itself. This is the top part of the unit. The bottom part is where you actually wrap the charging cord. Is very inspired by the garden hose wrap, or the traditional fuel connector. And this was by design. It really is about easing adoption and creating familiarity, creating a ritual around something that doesn't yet have a ritual. So the circular design essentially tells you that you should wrap rather than dangle your cords. It ends up looking something like this as a full device. Quite a slim form factor. The back is blank. You could put advertising there if you want. It's very visible from a distance. You can see that black and white design from 100 meters away, 10 meters away, 10 inches away. The design language kind of reinforces itself. What's interesting about this is that in real life, Ecotality has, over the last year and a half, been deploying these across the US and also in China. It's been very successful, and the demand has primarily come from establishments like the Starbucks of the world, the stadiums, public transportation areas. All of these are essentially places that are looking for the prestige factor that an electric vehicle brings to the table. And what they're doing is they're actually giving premium parking real estate, where normally you have handicapped parking, to electric vehicles, because you have these cool-looking devices that are going to attract people to park their cars there. Right? Now, what does this teach us about motivation? I think. Well, this is a clear example of the core product being the electric vehicle. People are going to be purchasing electric vehicles because they've made a decision that they like the car for a variety of reasons. But what's interesting here is that the enabling ecosystem is actually triggering a different type of use. So what happens when we see that? What happens when the enabling ecosystem itself is what is required to trigger green behavior? This is the principle that underlies kind of the fundamental kind of notions of experience design, which we talk about a lot at Frog, that it's not just the product itself, but it's all of the touch points that must be designed and thought about in total to create an experience that changes behaviors. Now, the question is, when you think about a green ecosystem, are some of those, what are the parts of the customer journey that actually are about driving motivation? What happens first? What are the parts that are about driving usage? That happens, when you have the product, and what happens after the fact? What drives loyalty? What drives advocacy? When thinking about a green ecosystem, not only understanding all of the parts, but understanding which are the parts that trigger motivation is often the hardest part. And in a case like this, you could argue that there's parts of the ecotality experience that are after the fact, that happen. They trigger loyalty and advocacy behaviors. But we did find from our research that there are people who were interested in purchasing a green car when they saw that it would allow them to park front and central at a stadium and show off to their friends. Right? So it is it's not always an easy answer to figure that out, but often thinking about the ecosystem as a whole beyond the product is a lens that we need to take that we don't do often enough. The second story I want to talk about is smart homes and pandas, which obviously are related, right? So smart homes, of course, a lot of talk about that nowadays. A lot of these futurist scenarios of, you come home and you buy you buy your mother a digital photo frame and she turns it on and it syncs with your photos and, sends you a smartphone message that she's using it and, things like that, which are always fun to think about. But, what's more interesting that I want to talk about is the home energy management perspective. There's, of course, a huge interest for consumers in reducing electricity. Utilities want people to consume less. Society wants people to be greener. All of these things are building quite a case for home energy management. We've done, a fair amount of exploration in this space. We did some work in Germany with a company named Yellow that essentially is a combination of a smart meter. But it started off, the core technology was a smart meter. But then, our job was to find ways to create more of a conversation between the consumer and the device, because people really don't know how to think about energy, right? It's like, how to translate dollars of savings, but most people don't have a good sense of what carbon offsets actually mean. And so how do you actually translate this into a language? And even beyond coming up with a language, how do you create an experience that will engage consumers? One of the funny things I think about this is it actually tweets. And so you would add this as a friend and or a follower, and the meter will tweet feeds to you about how you're consuming energy. So this has been reasonably successful for Yellow. We've also been exploring this in a much larger scale with a major technology brand that is essentially we worked with to take a home energy management system proof of concept and bring it fully to life. So think about the entire application strategy, the user experience, the design, the middleware, the hardware, the roadmap, the full development. Created a pretty rich interface that has everything from a lot of everything from very consumer-friendly language to an app store to let you download modules for the various things that various types of devices you may be using, all types of views and infographics and analytics to give you accurate information. All of this powered by a cloud. As we dive deeper into this, you realize that the volume of data that's created. They say something like 30 plus sensors are required to truly provide accurate data that is meaningful in a home energy network. And all of this needs to be processed on some cloud. So coming up with the whole the software stack and the cloud to bring this together was quite a challenge. But one of the interesting things that we learned as we went through this is, in a world of so many connected sensors, you have so much data. What are some new things this data can actually reveal to you? And this is a talk that was given at Microsoft last year that's essentially showing from a connected home energy management system how you could actually track whether your energy is coming from your Xbox or from a laptop in the office, right? And all of a sudden you have deep insight into whether the kid is doing his homework or whether he's playing games in his room, right? And this, in some ways, this was fascinating when I first saw this. This is a level of knowledge about what's going on in your home that no one outside of the family really has. And often the family doesn't even have themselves, right, if you're playing Xbox behind closed doors, right? And so imagine now all of this data that's not only visible on your home energy management system, but also is potentially sitting there on the cloud, owned by a third party that you're buying this system from. So more generally, this made us wonder, what happens if the cost of sustainability is actually privacy? And we think about the fact that we're in a personal data economy right now. Look at the trade-offs being made on social networks, on social shopping sites where people are giving up their behaviors, their locations on their mobile phones, all because they want some benefit from, they're expecting some benefit from the service. Why should that not extend to sustainability? Is this a new type of motivator that we haven't considered before? Is there a way that personal data could actually turn into a currency that is used to motivate more sustainable behaviors? So this was something that was quite fascinating for us to explore. We wanted to push it further with our client. But then what happened was there was an announcement that Google, Microsoft, and Cisco all dropped their home energy management plans. This was a few months ago. And our client ended up withdrawing their product as well. So why did this happen? A lot of reasons. Really tough to implement home energy management solutions. You need to have a whole home automation system around that. There are fundamental structural issues in terms of getting cooperation from builders and all of these things. But most interestingly to me at least was the fact that consumers aren't really motivated enough to change their behaviors. There's a well-reported Oxford study that says that just showing people your electricity bill and having them read it once a month will reduce their energy spend by 10%. Right? And at best, home energy management solutions that offer much richer visualizations and better ways to understand what you're doing, could maybe hit 15%. So is that really, let's say you apply all of your best design principles and make a truly amazing system, like we'd like to think that we did. Maybe you're hitting 18%, So is that really enough of a difference? I think what's interesting here is that there seems to not be that example of that trigger, right? That fundamental trigger that is going to make people adopt something, even if the benefit is not necessarily immediately quantifiable in big dollars. So this led us to explore this direction in a little more of a playful way. We staged what we called an energy think-in that we called Let's Find the Energy Panda. And this is something that we did with a bunch of consortiums in the US that involved, GE, Duke Energy, AEP, IBM, a bunch of big players in the energy space. But we approached it somewhat playfully. We said, what's really interesting about the sustainability movement is that there's if you think about the animal welfare endangered species movement, is that there's a symbol, the panda, which everybody understands. Everyone knows pandas are, so cute, and they mean taking care of the world around you, the animal world around you. But nothing like that exists for energy. There's no equivalent of a panda. So we said, could we find, the energy panda? What does it take? Like, could there be a symbol that is actually larger than a product, that is larger than the companies involved, that could actually help, transform, trigger that deeper behavior to make a change. And so, we really looked deeply into what are the ingredients that make up a symbol, the name, the symbol itself, the product, the ecosystem, the story around it. I'm not going to claim that we've found an answer. I just want to show you two very different examples of directions we went down. This notion of, is it something like a highly stylized, shape? Is it something that is more playful, that is meant to target an entire generation of, the new generation of kids through, a whole set of dialogues and conversations you'd have with them with media? It could be a whole variety of things. But it did lead to, the second question or third question I want to bring up about motivation. What are the prompts, or what prompts I should say, are the signals to initiate behavioral change? Is there something as simple as a single symbol? Is there something that can be that large and that powerful that will allow people to, that will trigger that change? We know it's not currency. I think what we heard earlier today is that for corporations, it actually is currency. You have the scale where if you implement green initiatives across, a 300,000 person organization, that translates into fundamental bottom line savings. But for the consumer level, that doesn't seem to be enough, except at least for the mass market. So what is that kind of larger idea, that larger symbol that will push people past that threshold to initiate behavioral change? Finally, the last story I want you to tell you about is about meat stew and ice lasers. Also, they do have a connection. This is the Wonder Bag, which is a South African product actually, made by a company called Natural Balance. It's a pretty cool device. It basically, you start cooking something in a normal pot, and then you place it in the Wonder Bag, and then you tie it up and you let it continue cooking in the Wonder Bag. And basically, this is a way to, essentially reduce the use of electricity by end of gas and paraffin and wood and other fuels, basically by allowing it to cook safely on its own based on the insulation of the bag. And this in turn, decreases demand, gives relief to local energy companies. This is meant to be deployed kind of in the mass market across South Africa. Here are some examples of it being used in the field. It's used by various social aid organizations across South Africa now, and people are buying them individually. Overall, it's a nice product. We were brought in to think about how to use connected technology to extend this product. This seems like a tough challenge, right? This is a very analog, non-digital, basic cooking utensil, right? Well, you can connect anything to the cloud, right? So what we did was we created a cloud around this. There's a mobile app that essentially tracks your usage, calculates your carbon savings, generates reports. It's mainly used by distribution agents to allow them to understand how these wonder bags are used. The purpose then is that it could then be fed back to the company, and the company can then provide this back to the European Carbon Exchange and allow them to trade credits, which is not something that they could do unless they were a much larger corporation normally, right? So in this case, the cloud is playing a very specific role. It's basically invisible to the consumer, but it's used as a way to essentially scale the company, right? It's a way to allow them to grow their business and then do what they do best, which is distribute, brand, and promote their product, and therefore drive more responsible behavior just through their scale, which is very hard to do if you're a smaller company. So in this case, it's an interesting vision of what the cloud could be. And this is actually, I would say, a traditional view of the cloud is that it passively motivates, right? It is in and of itself, it doesn't drive behavioral change, but it allows a cloud-powered business to scale. It serves as that background participant that enables business growth and then lets the business grow in the way that they want to grow by being more efficient, by saving costs, and by distributing. So this is kind of one vision of a cloud that I think of a green cloud that has a lot of familiarity to other kind of large cloud-based systems that we think about. A different one is something that we've been exploring with GE. GE we have a long relationship with over many years. One of their major business initiatives is Eco-Imagination, which is really about selling eco-friendly products, not because they want to be eco-friendly, but because they believe there's a fundamental revenue potential there. And so this is everything from green locomotives to aircraft engines. So one of the things we worked with them on is how could we take advantage of position them as more of a thought leader in the world of green innovation. And so crowdsourcing, of course, is something that is an obvious way to do that. But we thought, how could we push this further into a marketplace, essentially an innovation marketplace that is an open platform that allows the spirit of any individual with an idea to meet other people who are similarly minded and provide feedback and essentially grow the idea. Combine this with cash prizes and professional experts who know about the various focus areas like smart grid and renewable energy and others, and use that as a way to ensure that there's true quality there. This very quickly grew to thousands of ideas. This is actually right now it is actually one of the one of the largest open thought leadership marketplaces in the world right now, and a whole series of interesting ideas came out. The winner, actually, one of the winners, created these ice lasers that I was referring to. Right, it's basically using laser technology to de-ice wind turbines. Using basically high power pulses. So that was one of the 5 winners last year. But this is actually a very different type of cloud that is playing a role here. So this, rather than the Wonder Bag example that I asked about, in this case we wonder, what happens when the cloud actually actively motivates rather than passively motivates? What happens when it actually is viewed as a participant in the narrative or in the conversation between people by the virtue of the data that it provides, by the virtue of the way it connects people, but essentially it in and of itself is seeking to drive people who maybe would not have had the desire or the motivation to put their idea out there. But it is essentially, creating that a set of tools, a set of incentives, a reward system, gamifying the process somewhat to essentially encourage people to connect on the marketplace, to trade, and view the cloud as the enabler of that. So both of these, the active and the passive cloud, I think are both successful ways to think about motivation. They both are essential to drive motivation. In reality, it's probably a combination or a hybridization of the two that will be most relevant when we think about bringing any green innovation to life. So those are some of the questions that we think about. In terms of the answers to these, I don't really have them all right now. I can tell you that this process of generating questions and using them as a way to provoke inspiration is something that we engage with, is a way we engage with many clients. We're working with a number of the companies that I showed you here and others, really trying to push some of those questions further. The role of the cloud is something that has become quite a pressing question for many companies that we work with. Another one is around the symbol that I was mentioning, not necessarily looking for a true visualization, but that notion of what is it going to be that actually motivates behavior. Is it something tangible? Is it something intangible? And is there a way that we can try to find that or capture that? So all of these are areas that we're exploring. I hope that I know that many of you will be explore green innovation in your own ways in your own industries. Hopefully I've been able to give you a little bit of insight about how we approach this problem, and hopefully that can be valuable for you. Thank you.